So far in this series, looking at the history of Yu-Gi-Oh! Through its core sets, we have seen the first set with 9% bad vanillas, but 10% broken spells, the first set with monsters that would be good enough to ban, a set with spells so broken many of them are still banned to this day, and a set with a card so powerful it was banned, unbanned with an errata, and was so broken you need to be banned again. So yeah, I think it's safe to say Konami wasn't very good at balancing cards in early sets, and by the time we got to this set, Labyrinth of Nightmare, there was also one of the worst formats in the game's history, with the only really viable deck being a non-interactive deck whose only goal was to shred the opponent's hand before summoning one or two monsters for a slow beatdown win. So with the game in a pretty bad state from over-pushing cards in the last three sets, Konami decided to tone things down a bit for Labyrinth of Nightmare. Now this isn't this is a bad set, far from it, but definitely is the weakest we've covered so far other than LOB, with far less meta staples in it than previous sets, and a large amount of cards that many people likely don't even know exists, because they have never done anything relevant. However, despite this, the set still gave me a lot to talk about. Remember when I talked about Parasite a few lists ago? I said I'd rather have bad cards like this than bland vanillas, because at least there's something to talk about there. Well, we got a lot of cards like that in this set. Cards that just make you want to go, what the heck were they thinking? For both good and bad, there's a lot to talk about in this set, so let's not waste any more time and get right on into it. Now, as underpowered as many of the cards from this set are, I will concede it is bookended by two great for the time secret rares, though not as good as the last set we covered, are still far superior to the awful waste of cardboard from the first three sets. And kicking us off we have Gemini Elf, an under attack 4-star vanilla. There's most of them that impressive compared to the likes of Jinzo or Imperial Order, but this card was actually a massive buff for aggressive decks at the time, for a few reasons, and it did help bring aggro decks back to some degree of prominence in the age of hand control. Firstly, this card's power crept the ludicrously expensive Mechanical Chaser, 1850 attack vanilla. While this card was a secret rare, it was still easy to get than the Tournament Pack 1 secret chaser at the time, which made aggro decks a lot cheaper to build. Secondly, it made hand control less tedious to both play with and against, because it quickened the clock against the deck, and made the decks beating you when your hand was empty far quicker. Elf saw play for over a year after its release in various aggro decks, until around the time of Invasion of Chaos, when it was power crept by both a bigger beater in Berserk Gorilla, and a powerful piercer in Enraged Battleox. Not a bad resume for a vanilla card, wouldn't you say? Up next we have the second best ritual monster in the game at the time after Relinquished. But don't get too excited though, it's still terrible, it's just terrible with the higher attack points. It's the Masked Beast. A 3200 attack monster, this was one of the only ways back then to beat a blue-eyes white dragon in battle, the other being Black Skull Dragon. But that along with its interesting look was the only thing memorable about this card. As such, this card was really only good at your kitchen table against that one friend from school who always beat you with blue-eyes white dragon. Still, an awesome design though, I'll give it that. A weak vanilla with no effect, this card was used in the anime by Joey alongside Graceful and Skull Dice, two cards whose real life versions were heavily neutered from the anime, which makes this card even more useless than he already was. This is the purest example ever of just anime bait for kids who watch the show. Next. A water with the exact same stats as Mystical Elf, Humanoid Slime was the first of several slime-themed cards in this set, as one of the better ones, which isn't a good sign, but we'll get to that later. Now from a competitive perspective, this card isn't very good. The game had moved far beyond the need for these kind of cards. However, from a casual standpoint, this card was an okay pickup of players who wanted to just play the game with friends at home, and those players likely had less removal, and a wall like this with more likely to stick on the board. Again, not a great card, but considering the fact that Yu-Gi-Oh was hard to get into back then, it wasn't too bad for the younger kids, I suppose. Humanoid Slime's counterpart Fusion Material, on the other hand, is all fun no matter how you were playing Yu-Gi-Oh at the time, whether casual or competitive. A 1400 attack, 1300 defense monster, this card is just slightly better than Celtic Guardian, with a worse card type, a card that wasn't even good in Yu-Gi Kaiba format. Next. Okay, before I talk about this card, I've got to comment on how lazy that name is. No, it does just combine the two names of its material, but it doesn't make any sense. It's clearly not humanoid in any way, it's just another worm drake with a slime coating. Honestly, as lazy as it would have been, calling it slime worm drake would at least be more accurate. Other than this, there's nothing else to say about this card. It's a 200 attack vanilla that is level 7, meaning its only use was as a bad metamorphosis target, although even then, Last Warrior was a far better option. Not much else to say other than, I do like the slime aesthetic though. Next! Talk about a massive downgrade between an anime version of a card and the real life equivalent. In the anime, this card could rev itself every time it was destroyed for free, and it was not once per turn. I'm not saying a card like that would have been good to print into the actual game, but the version we actually got was a massive downgrade. The real life version can only be dropped back once per turn if it's started in battle, with the cost of 1000 life points and during the next standby phase. So yeah, not one good part of the anime version was brought into the actual game. Now that being said, while this card isn't that good, it does have some uses in good format. Firstly, it's a decent card in a deck known as Ectoplasma Control, which I'll be covering on this channel soon, so I'll talk about it more there. But essentially, the deck used the card Ectoplasma combined with Malice Doll of Demise to both force the opponent to sack their monsters and eventually burn them out for game. And because Malice routed itself every single turn, the deck also played card of Safe Return for a massive amount of card draw. So because of this, the deck also ran Revival Jam as another way of triggering return to quickly cycle through its deck and see its combo pieces. In addition to this, I personally have run this card in some Goat Monarch brews as tribute fodder, with the idea being to play this card as early as possible, hopefully turn 1, and when it's attacked over, you've got a guaranteed monster on turn 2 for tribute fodder. However, I will admit there are likely better options as sort of tree-born frogs and goats. Overall, Revival Jam is the first card that meets my criteria of bad but interesting cards that people can experiment with, like I said. I even did so yeah, more of this please. Another bad vanilla. This card's only interesting feature is it's one of the only 2 cards in the game that's both a wind and a fish. Next. You know, sometimes power creeping a bad card into a slightly better one isn't always good enough, like here with Amphibian Beast, a monster with 2400 attack, 2000 defense, that only costs 1 tribute, which yes, does make it a statistically better card than Rise Black Dragon, and despite this, it was still never played, as Summon's Skull was still just plain better. Nothing else to say here other than this card is a great showcase of why statistics aren't always correct. Up next, we're going to tackle 3 monsters used by the same characters in the anime, in Shining Abyss, the Grand Tiki Elder and Melkut the Four-Faced Beast. First because they all appear together in the anime, and second because they're all just bad vanillas, only one of which is above par for their level. Nothing much to say here other than with its high defense, Shining Abyss could at least be used in a casual setting. Next. Wow, it's Boar Soldier with a slightly less terrible effect and a better attribute, none of which makes Navier the Wicked worth playing, as losing 200 points for each of the opponent's monsters isn't much better than the flat 1000 the Boar Soldier loses. Next. Never before have I seen a card whose effect so loudly screams, I was made for one scene in the anime. A normal spell, Chosen One, allows its user to pick 3 cards, 1 monster and 2 non-monsters, from their hand, and then lets the opponent pick one. It then either sends all 3 cards to the grave if the card picked was not the monster, but if your monster gets picked you can summon it and still lose the other 2 cards. So at best this is a -3 and at worst it's -4 that literally does nothing. Yeah, this may have been good in the show as a way to build suspense, but in the real game it's nothing more than the worst possible version of Graveyard Setup 9% of the time. Up next, we've got the first of a series of mask cards we used in one episode of the anime, and for most of them there was more play than they got in the actual game. The first and arguably worst of which is Mask of Weakness. A normal trap, this mask, as its name suggests, weakens an opponent's monster by 700 points at the end of the turn. And if that sounds familiar, it's because it's a worse version of Shadow Spell, a card that not only permanently weakens a monster as long as it's on the field, but also prevents that monster from attacking. And Shadow Spell isn't even very good by itself, so why would you play an even worse version of it here? Next. Up next we have Mask of Dispel, a card with a very deceptive name, as all it does is attach itself to a spell card on the field and then act as a pseudo nightmare wheel by draining the opponent for 500 points each turn. Yeah, that's right, a card that's called Mask of Dispel can't actually stop spell cards in any way, and what it can do is done better by other cards like the aforementioned Nightmare Wheel. God, will any of these masks actually be anywhere decent? That'll do nicely. A continuous trap, Mask of Restrict is a floodgate that, while active, prevents all forms of tributing. Simple yet brutal, like all good floodgates should be. Now obviously this card is very situational, but when it's playable it's one of the best side deck cards ever made. This card first saw major play in 2016 when Monarch became the choice of every budget player, as preventing tribute summoning basically killed that deck unless they drew Twin Twister, which is ironic because the best version of Monarch also tries to win by resolving a floodgate that says the opponent can play as well. This card also saw play from 2017 to 2019 in response to other tribute decks like True Draco, and I'm sure if we ever get another good tribute archetype we'll see it once again. While it was nice to have one good mask to talk about, let's go back to the other mediocre ones with Mask of the Accursed. An equipped spell, this mask attaches to a monster the opponent controls, and as its name suggests, it applies several negative effects to that monster, including preventing the monster from attacking, and it also burns the equipped monster's control for 500 points each turn. So yeah, this is just Nightmare Wheel, but it's slightly worse, because it doesn't prevent position changes, and Nightmare Wheel nowadays only sees fringe play in slower burn decks in GOAT, so this weaker version never had a chance of seeing play, did it? How do you know when a card truly sucks? Well, even the anime where everyone plays bad cards can't make it look good. An equipped card, this mask increases the attack of any monster by 1000 while decreasing the defense by the same amount. In addition to this card also has a maintenance cost of 1000 life points each turn. Okay, so yeah, this is literally just a worse Axe of Despair, which not only doesn't have a maintenance cost or the defense decrease, but also has another upside of being able to be brought back from the graveyard. In fact, like I said, even the anime knew this card was terrible, as when a character played this card, they gave him a card that cancelled out maintenance costs. Yeah, even Konami knew no one would ever play this card by itself, which is all you need to really know about this card, really. So there's a card in a set coming up known as Monster Reincarnation, which lets us play discard a card to add a monster from grave back to hand. No, that card isn't great, only seen play in a few very specific decks, but it's still a direct upgrade to this card, Return of the Doomed. Like Reincarnation, Doomed also brings a monster back to your hand off of a discard. However, you have to discard a monster for the effect. The card you add back to your hand had to have died in battle, and it has to have died the turn you played this card. So yeah, as underpowered as Reincarnation was, just remember it could have been a lot worse. An equipped card, Lightning Blade, gives a warrior an 800 point boost, and it also reduces the attack of water monsters by 500, which I guess gives warriors Triumph a slight edge in a match versus Fury from the Deep. In all seriousness, this card isn't terrible and may even have a minor use in some Ben-K decks, but it's another example of a decent card with just better options available. I already talked about this card at length in my Fury from the Deep video, so I'll be brief here. A continuous trap turning a wall prevents all damage as long as it and Yumi are active on the field. Now by itself this isn't that impressive, not only is it a 2-card combo, but this half of it isn't even searchable. However, in the Umi control deck that Fury from the Deep enabled, this card is one of the best part of a mid-powered yet budget deck that could handle many GOAT decks back in 05 for a fraction of the cost. Ah yes, the early progression series staple. A continuous trap, Fairy Box allows you to control it to toss a coin whenever a monster attacks, and if you call it right, that monster's points go to 0. Also, this card costs 500 points per turn to keep in play, but that isn't much of a downside. Wow, does this card just scream, I haven't got another fourth ring of destruction because I'm 10 years old? I don't mean that as an insult either, actually, because back in the day, cards like Force Instruction were really expensive, and with Yu-Gi-Oh's player base being a lot younger than nowadays, this card and Sekiro to Armor were often played as a way of dealing with monsters using back row. Yes, this card's random nature and maintenance costs do mean that once a player has better removal, it's no longer a good option. However, for a budget starting card, this is one of the better ones you could be playing. Now we get to the good stuff, as not only is Torrential Tribute arguably the best card in this set, it's unarguably its longest lasting, with this card seeing play as late as a couple of years ago. A normal trap, Tribute has a simple yet devastating effect. When a monster is summoned, destroy all monsters on the field, and that's it. A Dark Hole effect with a summoning command to use it, this card, like Mirror Force, can be a devastating blowout, and it being a trap and therefore usable during the opponent's turn means that it also has a psychological effect on games that can discourage players from overcommitting to their plays, again like Mirror Force. Where it differs from Mirror Force is 1, it's far easier to activate, and 2, it also destroys your own monsters, which can literally be a downside if you're ahead on board, but can also be a good thing if you're either behind or have a bunch of floating effects to trigger, with this card seeing play in many decks throughout the years, from Chaos decks using it to clear the way for Yatalogs and triggering Sangan Witch, to Burning Abyss using it to clear away Winders, or triggering Dante Seal Loops. Yes, this card really has been good for a long time, with only falling out of favour a couple of years ago, and even today it's still seen fringe play in decks like Eldritch and Labyrinth. As such, this card is also one of the most hit cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! History, spending most of its time on the limited list until only a couple of years ago, and rightly so, because this is one of the best cards in this set and in early Yu-Gi-Oh! Oh, I've been talking about this card for a while. We've got to do easy here, ladies and gentlemen. This is not just actually the worst card in this set, no. This could very well be the worst continuous spell ever made. It's Jam Breeding Machine. A token spawner, this piece of shit will generate a slime token for you during each standby phase. A founder attack water with no effect. This token is already not worth playing this card to get, but oh boy does it get much worse. Firstly, this card summons the token into face-up attack position. I'd like to repeat that this token has got founder attack points and no effect, meaning a slight breeze can take these things out and deal you a huge chunk of damage every turn. Well, no big deal, you may think. I'll just tribute these tokens off before they can get destroyed. No, you won't, because this card's got another fatal downside, that being that whilst on the field, this controller cannot summon. Yes, in order to get these awful tokens that will almost guarantee a large amount of damage every turn, you've got to put yourself under a better royal oppression. Now yes, you can still set monsters under this, but in order not to get killed by your own tokens, you've got to continuously tribute set in a format where almost all the good tributes have very low defense points. So yeah, not only does this card royal oppression you, it's also Tsukuyomi's you as well. To be honest, the only use I can see this card having will be finding a way to donate it to your opponent, much in the same way that Branded does with the Gimmick Pocket Lock. So maybe one day this card may have a home, but for now it remains, in my view, the worst card in this set, and one of the worst cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! Period. One of the biggest examples of a noob trap I've ever seen in Yu-Gi-Oh! All this card does is remove the maximum hand size limit. Now to a new player this means a massive hand full of cards they can now play without worrying about removal, until they get card destruction, but that's besides the point. To a veteran player looking at this card, all they will think is, if I'm drawing enough cards that this effect even matters, how have I not won the game already? The best possible example of a win more card, this thing's only use is in a gimmicky Slifer or Muka Muka deck, which new players would hopefully have fun with until they got more experience and money to try playing competitively. Much like the card it works with, God did the anime make this thing look broken, only for us to be disappointed when we saw the real life version. A continuous trap, Jam Defender allows you to redirect an attack from one of the opponent's monsters to Revival Jam. Now, as I stated earlier, Revival Jam in the show would automatically summon itself from the grave whenever it was destroyed in battle with no once per turn limit, which with this card made a permanent negate attack essentially. In real life, Jam can only be brought back once during the next standby phase for 1000 life points, making this card just the worst possible petition of darkness. What disappointment. And now to 3 terrible cards in a row, let me show you one of the best cards ever made in Card of Safe Return. A continuous spell, this colossal design mistake lets its controller draw a card whenever a monster from their graveyard is summoned. Now this is not a once per turn, no it has no cost, and you can activate more than one at a time. Now this is obviously a busted card, however what may surprise many people is it actually took a while to see play. Somewhere around 2008, we got some of the most broken zombie support ever made, in the form of Zombie Master, Mizuki and El Blood, along with the already printed Book of Life, all of which combined with cards that come from the graveyard themselves, like Plague Spider Zombie, and with all this you had a nasty synchro combo deck that could use this card to potentially draw 5 or more cards, while getting out cards like Stardust Dragon, Black Rose Dragon, Doom Kaiser Dragon and a bunch of other powerful synchros, making one of the best decks in the OCG, that sadly we didn't get to play a full power in the TCG to do some bannings. Well, it was nice to have a good card top up for a short time. Now back to shit with Lady Panther. At level 4, this card offers a mild form of recursion by allowing you to return a monster from your graveyard to the top of your deck. A neat effect were not for the fact that the card in question has been destroyed in battle the same turn you use this effect. The only way to use this card is in response to a removal of a monster that was already too weak to be on the opponent's side of the field, meaning you likely don't want it back on top of your deck where it can't be used unless it's some kind of flip effect. In fact, one thing I've noticed in this set with the worst cards is severe overbalancing, and this card here is a prime example of this. If this card just brought back any card top of your deck, it still would have been underpowered, but this overbalancing here makes it completely useless. Hey, I guess we found a use for Gymnopedie machine, eh? Okay, in all seriousness, while the only non-Amazon card is a good beater for its level at 2000 attack points, she has such a massive downside that she wouldn't have seen play even if beatdown decks weren't seeing fringe play at best at the time. Sure, she can beat over a Gemini Elf, but I'd rather lose one monster to this in battle than the 3 or so I'd lose in keeping this thing on the field. Next. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Miss Amazoness Archer on her transition. I would also like to congratulate her on being one of the few cards in this set to have seen play more than a decade after first being released. Essentially a bigger and more all-in version of Cannon Soldier, this card is also a monster who burns at the cost of a tribute. However, unlike Soldier, she burns for 1200 a shot, but she also requires 2 monsters to be used as bullets, as opposed to Soldier's 1. The thing this would make her unusable, as it would be harder to loop than Cannon Soldier, but there are a few decks that actually prefer this, namely Infinity and 6 Samurai decks. 2 decks that can summon 2 monsters at the same time. These decks like to loop cards like the Blue Man Samurai and Infinity Necromancer and Archfiend to do repeated damage in OTK. That being said, yeah, this card is really just a more hipstery Cannon Soldier, and then 9 out of 10, you really should just stick to the former. Wow. This is just Lady Panther, but even worse. This card sends the card revives to the bottom of your deck, making it like you'll ever see it again. Unless you got your way to search it, I guess. And Lady Panther already sucked. Next! Up next, we got a card that, while not amazing, was still unique and strong enough to be the centerpiece of our own rogue deck back in the day. A level 4 Fire Princess actually makes life gain somewhat viable by adding 500 points of burn damage to any form of life gain. This effect, as stated, was the key to the burn deck known as Princess Burn, which combined burn and life gain together with this card to make a weaker yet more grindy burn deck that used cards like Cure Mermaid and Solemn Wishes to grant life points every turn and get a consistent amount of burn damage each turn as well, that doesn't consume resources, which the advantage this deck has over other burn decks like Panda Burn and Stall Burn. In addition to this card also was very searchable thanks to UFO Turtle, so the deck was actually pretty consistent. Now, is this the best form of burn? No. But the fact that a card with such a niche effect finds its own deck that can give GOAT's best decks run for their money is still pretty impressive, which makes Fire Princess one of the more interesting cards we talked about in this list. A mediocre Stazid Flip monster, this card does offer a Nukazi on a body once flipped at the cost of managing 3 cards on the top of your deck. Now, in my view, the cost isn't really an issue, as managing cards from the top of your deck isn't a big deal in a deck running mostly 3-ofs, since they aren't actually resources till they're in your hand, in the grave, or on the field. However, the problem is the damage this card deals isn't really worth it when we have cards like Just Desert's Secret Barrel and other cards in burn doing 1,000 or more damage each. Maybe if this card burned on summon rather than on flip, it would be good, but as it is, it's not terrible, but there's just so many better options that's not even worth considering in most burn decks. Want to know what the last card would have been like if she was one of the worst cards ever printed? Meet Fire Sorceress. The same effect as Lady Assailant, this card also lets you banish cards upon flip to burn for 800. However, while Assailant banishes on top of your deck, meaning it doesn't really cost you any resources, this bitch on the other hand costs you 2 cards from your hand. No, you didn't mishear me. To get a Nukazi from this piece of shit, you need to go -2. Oh, that isn't even the worst of it. No, the fact that you have to banish these cards at random from your hand, meaning you don't get to pick what's chosen, so you could lose some of your best cards for a Nukazi. Okay, that's enough. Get this filth out of here. Next card. Konami, why? You have a perfectly serviceable card here in Spirit of the Breeze, a fairy that gains its controller 1,000 life points a turn, and you had to go and ruin it by making the effect conditional on keeping this 0 attack monster in attack mode. Seriously, you couldn't give this thing some attack points? Yeah, I know this card's like it's designed to work with things like Gravity Bind and Fire Princess, but its low stats make that way too risky an idea, and it's better left to combine Princess with cards like Solemn Wishes instead, which is a real shame because this art is so nice. Oh well. Okay, when I look at these last 2 cards, I've got to wonder, do they get these effects backwards or something? Like Spirit of the Breeze, Dancing Fairy also gains you 1,000 life points, as long as it stays in a certain position. However, this time it's in defense position, which like Spirit of the Breeze, makes this card a lot weaker. Now this card is better than Breeze, as 1, Fairy is an okay beater, and 2, at least has some defense points. However, it also has to be face up to use its effect, making it much slower than Spirit of the Breeze. So the bottom line is, don't play either of these even in Princess Burn. Next. Take my thoughts on Lady Panther and Crimson Century and replace the word monster with spell card, and you've got my thoughts on this because it's just the same thing, aka bad. Next. Wow, another 1 tribute vanilla that can't compete with Someone's Skull. At least everyone's got nice art, I guess. Next. Wow, we actually have a good life gain card in this set. A level 4 water, Cure Mermaid simply grants its controller a flat 800 points during each of their standby phases with no position requirements or any of the costs to play it, making it the second best life gainer to play alongside Solemn Wishes in the aforementioned Princess Burn deck. Just set this up with the aforementioned princess and way to keep them safe, like Labyrinth Area B and Gravity Bind, and watch the opponent's life points slowly slip away, while you're getting a massive chunk of life yourself, so that even if you are disrupted, you've got enough life points in the slow go format to last a few turns where you set your lock back up again. Again, the deck this card is a part of isn't very good compared to other forms of Burn and Goat, but it is more unique and interesting. In fact, I think I'll be covering Princess Burn at some point on this channel, so stay tuned for that. Up next we've got another life gain effect that's actually on a decent monster. However, the life gain will be the last reason we will play this card. An 800 attack point light beater, Aesthetic Fairy has the effect of gaining its controller 1,000 life points for the cost of defeating 2 monsters. Now this card was played in some Chaos decks back in the day, but not for its life gain effect, which like Fire Sorceress has way too high a cost to matter, rather because one, she's a decent beater for the time, and 2, this tribute effect in a pinch could be used for an easy Chaos setup in the early game. For example, if you open this, a Chaos card and Sandgun, you now have got a Chaos monster and a Surge turn 2, and while that may be the best outcome for this card, even at its usual level of usefulness, it was still an okay beater for the time. Again, not amazing, but a better card than many on this list. Another admittedly good looking but terrible normal monster with nothing interesting to talk about other than its art. Next. The best version of the Lady Panther effect, and a slightly improved mystical elf, the Forgiving Maiden is a war monster with 2,000 defense points. They'll also let this controller tribute it to add back a monster destroyed on the same turn. However, it's better than Panther as it lets you put that card back in your hand rather than the top of the deck. This still's not very good, because it's still a very limited effect, but it is the best out of all of these in this set, with the best body as well. So it's not nothing you play in many decks, but better than the others. You know, for a card with as cool of a name and art as this, you expect this card to be a lot better than a mere big dumb beater, but that's all we've got here with St. Joan. Again, everything I've said about bad fusions from around this time applies here, and that all she is a metamorphosis target for situational snatch steals, and not much else. Now this art would be used again in another card later, but it wasn't that much better, unfortunately. Still, better than this. Next. A card that will one day be errata to be in the Dark Lord archetype. Dark Lord Marie here, originally called Marie the Fallen, has the ability to gain you 200 life points each turn as long as she's in your graveyard. So another life gain ability from this set that synergizes with Princess. This card may be the worst of the bunch, as long as she offers the least amount of life gain, but she also wants to be in the grave to get this effect. Now you could argue that the effect triggering in the graveyard makes it harder to respond to, but I'd argue I'd rather have life gain that can actually make the game go longer. Next. Okay, up next we've got a card that's recently gained a lot of popularity in GOAT format. It's Jar of Greed. The weaker trap version of Pot of Greed, this card lets you draw one card, but at trap card speed. Now why would this card see play in the same format as Pot of Greed and Graceful Charity, you ask? Well, for two main reasons. Deck thinning, particularly in aggro decks, and its heavy storm and MST bait. You see, one thing people have begun to realise in GOAT format is it's actually a lot faster and more consistent than people thought back in the day. And people are now running not just this, but also 3 copies of Upstart Goblin, particularly in combo and aggro decks, to cycle through their deck quickly and seeing all their combo pieces and big finishes very fast. But even more important than this is the fact that this card is one of GOAT's best ways of dealing with heavy storm. You see, in GOAT format, unless you're playing Burn, it's not often very wise to set multiple pieces of back row out of fear of getting 2 for 1 or worse by heavy storm. This card, however, being a trap card that draws a card, gets around this problem, as you can set this at another back row, change to the heavy storm, and now at best your opponent is down a card, and so are you, well you've drawn one, meaning they've wasted one of the biggest blows in early Yu-Gi-Oh! And that's just for heavy storm. Against 1-for-1 removal like MSG or Dust Tornado, this card just makes the opponent go -1 for nothing, and has a huge tempo shift. And outside of this card's also seen play in other decks over the years, from Exodia decks to dig through for their one-shot combo, to Chain Burn as another chainable trap to add to your Chain Strike plays. Overall, a powerful and useful card, Jar of Greed has truly found its home in both old school and somewhat modern Yu-Gi-Oh! As one of this set's sleeper hit cards. An equip spell, Scroll of Bewitchment lets its controller switch the attribute of the equipped monster to another one, but only once. Okay, I can think of a couple of niche styles that could be useful, but changing these kind of stats has never really been worth it, especially just by themselves. That's no different here. Next. Up next, we're once more looking at 2 cards that are very similar, with United We Stand and Mage Power. 2 of the most powerful equipped cards printed in early Yu-Gi-Oh! These massive power boosters each grant the monster they're equipped to a boost, depending on the number of certain cards that are on the controller's field, with United giving a monster 800 points for every monster you control, while Mage Power gives 500 points for every spell and trap card you control. Yeah, as you can imagine, things got out of control really fast with these 2 cards. In fact, they started seeing play almost immediately upon being printed in an equipped aggro deck that used these cards along with cards like Axe of Despair and Malevolent Nuzzler to buff cards like Maham Vilo into massive beaters. The card also saw play in Ben KOTK, a one-shot combo deck whose aim was to buff up Armed Samurai Ben K with a bunch of equips while hitting for 5 attacks at once, with Mage Power in particular being a great card in this deck, as I wanted to play a bunch of other back row. But if you want to know more about that, I've got a video about it. Sorry about some of the audio, it's an old one. These cards were so powerful in fact, they had to be stamped with one of the first cards ever banned, and Mage Power was restricted for a long time, and even today making a massive monster with one of these cards is some of the most fun things you can do in GOAT format. Wow, talk about a late bloomer. A quick play spell, Offerings to the Doomed, in addition to having not one, but 2 of the coolest artwork I've seen in Yu-Gi-Oh! Can destroy one monster in the field at the cost of skipping your next draw phase. A downside that unfortunately meant the card saw almost no play upon release, due to the game being so focused on advantage at the time. In addition to this, by the time the game was fast enough that this card's downside was not that important, tightening removal was actually on its way out. That wasn't until the release of a certain deck you may have heard of known as, I don't know, Sky Strikers? You see, the game was starting to move away from decks like Cosmo that couldn't be targeted, meaning this card could be used again, and with it not being once per turn, it meant it could take out boards far stronger than Strikers without using in-archetype cards, and also boosted Strikers' spell counts to more easily trigger their in-archetype cards' bonus effects. The downside of this card never mattered, thanks to Striker Engage, both searching cards and drawing ones as well. Honestly, Offerings is a card that shows how often older cards may have some use one day. I predict one day someone will find a use for it in GOAT as well. Next. Up next we're going to talk about 5 monsters in one, and that's the 5 occult themed cards Bakura used in the anime, namely the Eel of Demise, the Portrait Secret, the Gross Ghost, Headless Knight and Earthbound Spirit. And the reason they're here together is that they're all terrible vanillas that have cool artwork but nothing else to offer. Some of these will get reprints in the future, however, so look forward to seeing that in a future video. Next we've got another collection of monsters in Bornheimer, Flame Dancer, Lightning Conga and Surfer's Lady. And the theme here is that they're all bad vanillas I wish didn't exist. Next. Okay, I talked about most of the cards Bakura played in Battle City from this set, but there was one I was saving for its own entry, because this card is one of the strongest and most evil cards in the game. I give you Jaugen the Spiritualist. Sure, he may not look that evil as the occult monsters do, but looks can be deceiving. Firstly, this card is one of the best floodgates ever printed, as while he's on the field, neither player can special summon. Brutal, but oh does it get worse, as not only this guy a floodgate on the board, he's also a board breaker, as you can discard one spell and destroy all pressure monsters on the field. So yeah, unless you're playing Stun, Monarch or Burn, this card completely wrecks your game plan. That's not even the worst part. You see, Jaugen first rose to prominence in last turn FTK decks. One of the dumbest cards ever made. Last turn lets you summon a monster, then your opponent summons a monster, and then you have one last battle with the duelist with the winning monster winning the whole game. Well, that's how it's meant to work in theory. In practice, you play last turn, summon this, lock your opponent out special summoning, and they win by default after they punch you in the face. All party people but Jaugen here would seen play again as a spellcaster target in spellbooks for the best card spellbook of Judgment, which not only let them draw a bunch of cards, but also summon essentially any spellcaster as long as this level was lower than the amount of books they played that turn, which essentially means any spellcaster. Because what's worse than post-typical Runic? Post-typical Runic with a guaranteed floodgate at the end. Speaking of which, this card these days he's playing pure stun and runic stun lists as a way of paralysing decks like Snake Eyes, so their controller can either mill out their opponent or just make them quit out of boredom. So yeah, that's Jaugen. The Yu-Gi-Oh! Equivalent to that grouchy old man next door who won't have any fun. Damn, this guy is boring. Next. Oh look, it's Jaugen's cool older brother. An 800 attack beater, Kaiku the Ghost Destroyer, owner of the most badass name in Yu-Gi-Oh!, is also a floodgate that prevents the opponent from banishing from the grave. In addition to this, he also banishes 2 cards from the grave whenever he attacks. So as you can imagine, this card saw heavy play versus Chaos decks in GOAT format, as this one card can shut off all Chaos monsters from being summoned, and it also emptied the opponent's graveyard so they couldn't summon Chaos monsters even once this card was removed. In fact, it even saw playing Chaos Mirrors, as not only could this card give the person who first summoned it an easy win, but it could also be a dark to banish if it was removed. This card would continue to see play after Chaos, with it being used versus Monarchs to banish Treeborn Frogs, before showing up again half a decade later in spellbooks with Jaugen as a way of preventing players from summoning Dragon Rulers. Badass name, badass art, badass effect. Kaku is one of the best cards in this set, and one of the most iconic as well. This guy is just cool. Why was this card not good? A weak flip monster, summon evolutions upon flip, with Blitzscare Metamorphosis on a stick, as to let you tribute a monster to summon any fusion from the deck, but it would die at the end phase. Well, I think it's obvious why he wasn't good, and no, it wasn't to destroy the end phase to fire the effect. I mean, we see how good instant fusion is, right? Now it's all because he's a flip monster, which means 9 times out of 10, all he'll really do is put up another body to protect your life points after he's flipped in an attack, meaning you won't get much benefit out of this effect. That being said, I do think in GOAT this card may have a home one day in a control deck full of removal to protect him, as getting a massive body on the board on your turn to attack before tributing in front of the big beater and setting up potential BLS play has to be good at some point, right? Up next, we got one of GOAT format's oldest staples that may have fallen out of favour recently but used to be one of the biggest threats in one of GOAT's best decks. It's Bazoo the Soul Eater. A level 4 with 600 attack points, this creepy little baboon has the effect to remove up to 3 monsters from his controller's graveyard and gain 300 points for each one till the end phase of the opponent's turn. So yes, as long as you had a full grave, this card was usually the biggest normal summonable beater in the game, and this was a staple in decks not focused around chaos monsters, most notably Beast Down. A variant of beatdown decks focus on big beast monsters, mostly designed to counter GOAT control with cards like Enraged Battle Ox to pierce through tokens. In addition to this, the card has also had its own strategy known as Bazoo Return, which as you probably inferred from the name usually requires a full grave and this card to fuel a massive return from a different dimension for an OTK. Unfortunately for Bazoo, both his decks no longer see much play in GOAT, with Beast Down falling in favour of Earth Aggro and his other deck falling in favour of Gate combo decks. Still, this guy is part of a lot of good decks in early GOAT and should be respected for that. And now we turn to the monsters from this set that require a banish or two to summon, and we begin with another iconic Bakura monster in Dark Necrofear. One of the creepiest monsters ever made, Necrofear requires 3 fiends being banished from the grave to summon her, and has the effect that when she's sent to the graveyard by the opponent's card effect, she equips to a monster and lets you take control of it. Yes, a literal snatch steal on a body. So why did this card see almost no play? Because it's almost impossible to summon, that's why. Yes, while every other banish summon monster in this set requires attributes, this one requires types, needing the 3 fiends, like I said, to summon it. As almost no fiends other than Summon Skull saw play in early Yu-Gi-Oh!, this card never saw play either despite its amazing effect and awesome artwork. That's a real pity, actually. Up next, we've got the Light Banish monster in Soul of Purity and Light. Requiring the banishing of 2 lights, this card has 2000 attack points and the effect to reduce the opponent's monsters by 300 points during the battle phase. Now, for a long time, this card didn't see much play. That wasn't until some fate that Light Beatdown was a decent rogue choice in GOAT, and this card was both an easy to summon big body and an attack reducer that would allow more attacks to go through during the battle phase. Now, I plan on covering this deck on GOAT Guides soon, so I'll talk about it more there, but this card was really a good fit for this deck that actually give it a chance against some of the bigger beatdown strategies. Up next, we have the last of the banished cards in the spirits of Earth, Water, Wind and Fire. All of them require the banishing of the same attribute as them to summon. All cards with OK stats, the main draw of these, there were essentially 3 bodies you could play in attribute-focused decks, with the Rock Spirit in particular seeing play in Block Dragon combo decks. However, to be honest, all these cards other than Rock ended up being filler in attribute structure decks, because upon release they were too weak to compete with better beaters, and later on in the game, there was no need for these kind of generic extenders, again outside of Rock Spirit and Block Dragon decks. Speaking of Earth deck extenders, up next we've got Gillosaurus, a level 3 Earth that can summon itself from your hand at the cost of the opponent being able to summon from their graveyard, which meant that going first this card was just a free level 3 body, making it a powerhouse in Block Dragon Burning Abyss, as both level 3 for Cherubini and Dante, as well as an Earth for Block Dragon summons. You're not apart from a 20-year-old card at the time, and this card could see more play in the future in decks like Goblin Riders, who knows. So we all know how good Giant Trunit is, right? One of the premier butt wipes in GOAT format and a card that will likely never be unbanned. So surely putting a similar effect on a monster would be just as good, right? Wrong! Yeah, it turns out when you put a back row bounce effect in a flip, which makes it much less likely you can use it on your own turn, you end up with just losing what made Giant Trunit so good. The ability to OTK out of nowhere. Next! Okay, this is just Petition of Darkness with a fragile self 300 point body. I mean, I guess this word's better than Petition to Prevent Confusion, I suppose. Next. Okay, before talking about this card and how it's risen to prominence in Goat formats in recent years, did you guys know that he's also a reference to the original manga, where Zombie was pretty much a Spawn-like superhero? Yeah, that's pretty cool, eh? So back to the card himself. Zombie is actually one of the biggest level 4 beaters in Yu-Gi-Oh! At a whopping 2100 attack points. However, like the character in the manga, this power comes with a price. Firstly, Zombie can't attack directly, and secondly, he also loses 200 attack points whenever he destroys a monster in battle. So the first downside isn't really that bad, as games of Yu-Gi-Oh! Are won and lost before life are actually at 0, so you can just use this guy to pick off monsters while others do the damage. However, the other downside of this card was thought to for a long time to be enough to keep him at a competitive play, with him dropping below acceptable beta status after 2 attacks. That was until Gravekeeper's Spy became a Goat format staple, with this card quickly roll over upon being summoned. In addition to this, its dark attribute also allowed Goat warriors to splash Chaos cards themselves, and you added the fact that this card was rotor searchable, and you had an anti-meta warrior staple. Not a bad effect, supply suffers slightly from being too specific a card. A flip monster, this card attempts to make polymerization more viable in old formats, by allowing users to buy back their fusion material when he's flipped. Not a bad effect honestly, but the problem is this card does nothing by itself, and it's not really that searchable for when you fusion summon, so it's just more trouble to have than it's worth in your deck, despite the advantages it could generate. Yeah, this card's not making polymerization more usable than Metamorphosis and Goat, unfortunately. This card is a spell negate with no major cost, and it's still unplayable. I will admit that's pretty bad. Yeah, this card contributes itself to negate a spell, but the problem is it's a puny 900 attack body, meaning almost every deck can summon any monster, run this over, and then play the spell, which is a shame because that would be a cool effect to have. This one card killed an entire format. You see, Konami once tried to make Deck Masters a thing in the actual game, but the problem was they made a rule that the Masters effect was live in the Deck Master zone. So everyone went, okay, I'll choose this then, and I win because no one can play any of the monsters. This is because Last Warrior from Another Planet, as well as something like the name of a cheesy B-movie, upon summon, nukes his controller's board. Now that sounds terrible, but its other effect more than makes up for this. That being, as long as he's on the field, neither player can summon. No, not just special summon, no summoning at all. So yes, if this guy is out on an empty field, the opponent might as well scoop unless they've got something like Raigeki Break, because that's the only way to get this thing off the field. In fact, the only reason this card hasn't seen play everywhere in Goat is he's a level 7, making him a very hard Metamorphosis target. Collective power is something that all workers should attempt to get through unionization for better wages and better working conditions. Now back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Because it's also a mediocre normal trap that allows one monster to take all the equipped cards on the field they legally can, any others sent to the graveyard. Honestly, not a great card, but I would imagine it's seen some side deck play in early Yu-Gi-Oh! When the Matt have valuable equipped decks running around, but it's hard to find deck lists from that far back, so I can't say for sure. Okay, so this is an interesting card. Yes, we've seen other cards that can negate an opponent's attack before, but Dark Spirit of the Silent is a little different. You see, not only does this card negate an attack, it also initiates one by forcing another monster to attack instead. Now this does make the card very situational, as the opponent needs 2 monsters for this to work, but there are some cool things you could do with this card, such as force the opponent to attack you with a monster that will be destroyed in battle, force a big monster to attack into a magic cylinder, or my personal favourite, force a monster from defense into attack position to get more destructions with Middle Force. Now again, this card is very narrow, but it does open some creative uses, so I can't be too mad at it. You know, it's crazy how some really powerful cards go undiscovered for years, despite them being obviously broken from the start. A continuous trap, Royal Command is a floodgate that as long as it's on the field, all flip monsters can't be activated and their effects are also negated. Now surprisingly, this card saw very little play in the actual Goat format, despite being dominated by cards such as Morphing Jar and Magician of Faith. Mostly because most players are also playing Goat Control or Chaos, and also need flip monsters, until the realization in modern Goat that aggro decks with little flip monsters were actually broken, which this card slotted right into, especially in decks like Beast Down Warrior and Earth Aggro. However, where this card really saw play was actually over 10 years later in both Duelist Alliance and Necros format in the side decks of both Burning Abyss and Cleafort. Why? Because this card doesn't just negate flip effects, nor it negates all effects of flip monsters, meaning against Shaddolls, this card was just a one-sided skill and soul drain, a card which both decks also ran. A counter trap, Riroku Field, is the narrowest of Magic Gemma type effects, in that it can only get a spell that targets one monster exactly. Now sure, unlike many of its contemporaries, it doesn't require a cost, but if you're considering playing this, why not just run Magic Drain instead, which not only can negate any spell, but can also rip a card out from the opponent's hand if they want to stop it. Another example of this side of a card too specific to see any real play, unfortunately. A continuous trap, Skull Lair, is a repeated form of removal, but lets it use the banished monsters from their graveyards to pop a monster on the field with levels equal to the banished cards. So yes, this is a continuous source of targeted removal as long as your grave is nice and full of monsters, which yes, will be a challenge for some decks, however there are a couple that can take advantage of this card's powerful potential. Most notably was Strike Ninja, a deck I've covered on Gold Guides in the past if you're curious, which ran a playset of DD Scout play and a card that brought itself back to the field when banished, making it repeated fodder for this card. In addition to this, aggro decks with very high monster counts and minimal recursion could also make use of this card, as they usually have no use for their monsters once they were dead, so why not use them as bullets against control decks with low level monsters. But this card's most popular use was actually not as a removal piece, but as a combo piece. You see, by using this thing to kill just one level 4 or 5 monster, you know what, 4 or 5 cards banished, I think you see where I'm going with this. Yes, this card is one of the best ways to fuel an OTK with Return or Dimension Fusion, a combo that's one of the best ways to win in the aforementioned Strike Ninja deck. One of the best cards ever, Skull Lair, is one example of a new card in this set that was actually playable, so I give it props for that. Okay, before I talk about this card, let me ask you, what do you think this card does based on this artwork? Now, I'd assume this card was a removal card like Tribute to the Doomed, or maybe a card that affects the opponent's graveyard in some way. Well no, it's actually just a burn spell that does 100 points of damage during each standby phase for each of the opponent's banished monsters, which is very minimal burn and not worth playing, and I really still like waste such cool ass as a mediocre effect. Okay, now as a kid I loved this card for its artwork, and I did play it in the first deck I ever built, mostly at random packs I got on holiday. However, it really isn't good, as all this trap does is give a monster 100 points for each card in its controller's graveyard when activated. Now potentially depending on your deck this could make a large monster, but for further boost is only one turn and very inconsistent, makes this card not really worth playing. Again though, great artwork. Okay, before talking about this card, I gotta mention that this card's one of the funniest arts in Yu-Gi-Oh! I mean, look at that, it's like a Looney Tunes cartoon. But what does this card actually do? Essentially, it turns all your monsters into cards capable of destroying in battle, even if you're in defense, as if they are attacked and they've got more defense, this card will then destroy the attacking monster. Again, not a terrific card, but one that could be used in budget defense-focused decks, which did see some play in early Yu-Gi-Oh! I mean, imagine Mystical Elf just whumping a card after they take damage. That's kind of funny, isn't it? And now we have one of, if not the worst destruction effect ever printed in Blind Destruction. A continuous trap, this card actually has the potential to destroy a monster I do every single turn, but more often than not it'll do nothing or even hurt you, as once per turn during your standby phase, this card lets you roll a d6 and destroy monsters at the same level you rolled, unless you rolled a 6, then instead of things 6 or higher. It's at this point I'd like to remind you guys that most monsters played at the time this card came out were exactly level 4, meaning that often this card would do nothing 5 out of 6 times. And let's say you hit a number that corresponds to the monster on the field, well congrats, you've lost all your cards at the same level as well, because this effect is symmetrical. Oh god, it just keeps getting worse, doesn't it? Yeah, overall, never play this card, just play any good removal instead. It's Imperial Order, but just for equips, and thus was never playable because Order was illegal when this card would have seen play. Also, why did you censor this Royal Highness's glorious body, Konami? Next. Before talking about this card, can I just point out that while Yu-Gi-Oh was too scared to have these cards spell out death, Magic the Gathering has cards like Murder and Terminate and no one cares. Anyway, Destiny board is the second ever alternative win condition in Yu-Gi-Oh, and so its new support was nearly impossible to pull off. Now yes, Exodia was tricky to use, requiring a whole deck to play, but this card not only requires that, but also that the opponent has no back row hate whatsoever. You see, Destiny board is a continuous trap that once per turn lets you activate a spirit message from your deck, so yeah, you didn't draw any of them, and then once these letters spell out their final message, which is final in the TCG or death in the OCG, you win the game. However, if these pieces die, they all go. So better pray your opponent didn't open Heavy Storm, MST, Dust Tornado, or any other kind of back row hate. So as you can imagine, this deck didn't see any play at the time. However, years later we did get new Bakura themed support cards to make this process much easier. So at least these cards are now playable, even if they're still kind of bad. However, I would be remiss if I didn't point out this card did see play in the Game Boy Advance game The Sacred Cards Speedrun, as players found a way to manipulate the game to always open this combo. Yeah, that's very niche, I know, but it's more play than some cards in this set got that were bad, so there's that. Next. A Floodgate of sorts, this continuous spell allows only one monster to attack each turn, which like many cards in the set is a decent effect, though it's deeply outclassed by other cards, because why play this when you can just play Gravity Bind, Relentless Area B and prevent all attacks? Unless I guess if you're playing maybe Benkei or TK and only need one attack to win, but that's a very niche scenario and an effective way to play this deck. Plus Benkei plays Giant Trumate anyway, so you can still play those other Floodgates and just bounce them when you need to. Next. And now we've got a card that you wouldn't think would see that much play, but for one very specific reason it did. It's Spiritualism. A normal spell, this card is to Giant Trunade while MST is to Heavy Storm, as it can bounce one back row to the opponent's hand. Not bad, but not great, so why did it see play? Because it can't be negated, which means yes, you can use this to its Imperial Order in spell-focused decks like Sky Striker, and because of this card did see play in the late 2010s when Order was brought back to 1 for some stupid reason. And I don't think I'll see play ever again because Order's never coming back, but it's nice that an old card like this got to see play once at least. Oh wow, another Fairy Meteor Crush that only works on a bad vanilla, thus gives it a 300 point boost. Yeah, I'm not going to dignify this one. Next. Okay, another card from this set that is unique and actually good, it's Bait Doll. A normal spell, this card plays a little bit like the last effect of Trickstar Light Stage, and then it forces a back row the opponent controls to activate. Then if it's a trap card, its activation timing is wrong, it's destroyed. Also makes this card better the fact that it's reusable, as when it's sent to the graveyard, it instead goes back into your deck. So yeah, this one card can be a repeatable trap removal. There's a lot of utility in one specific deck called Pixie Control. You see, the card Pixie Knight essentially acts like Magician of Faith when it hits the graveyard, making the opponent pick a spell and add it back to your hand. As such, we don't play many spells in this deck, only the best of Goat, and this card, because it never hits the graveyard, so we never got to worry about it. Wow, another card that screams, I was made for the anime only. A quick play spell, Diffusion, does what it says in the tin. It puts part of fusion monster into material, as long as you have all that material in your graveyard. Which you never will have, because no one was summoning with Polymerization at the time, they were only using Metamorphosis, making this card just a very limited Regeki break, because it will also destroy the opponent's fusion monster. Which again, isn't awful, but there's so many more generic removal in Goat format that's just not worth playing. Another useless fusion card, this field spell essentially acts like a permanent poly on the field, letting us control a fusion summon using material from the hand or field. Except one, it bashes material, making it worse in the long run than poly, and also, just like poly, it requires you to play the fusion material for fusion cards. Most of the time were terrible, hence no one played this or poly at the time. Hey everyone, question. How bad does repeatable removal have to be to see no play? This bad. An equip, Ekmo Dragmond, I don't care if I butchered that name, destroys the cards equipped to, and then bounces back to your hand to do it again. So what's the problem then? It takes 3 turns to do this once. Until then, all this card does is clog up your field. Yes, the equipped monster can't attack, but if it gets tributed, this card just goes away for good, meaning you might as well just have played Smashing Ground and been done with it. Also, the only upside for this card is its searchable removal thanks to Iron Blacksmith Kotetsu, but that in no way justifies playing it over better removal like, again, Smashing Ground. Wow, it's better off in a different dimension, but it's not quick play, it requires 5 banish cards to use, and was made before Mizuki came out, aka a very bad Barrel of Infinite Dimension. Next. This card only equips to a warrior. It gives that warrior a 500 point buff, and also makes it a dragon in addition to being a warrior. So yes, it's just an LOB equip with a useless flavour added onto it. Now yes, this card could work with other dragon support, but would you play a warrior that wasn't something like DD Warrior Lady in that deck? And even if you did, is this really worth playing? No, it really isn't. Next. Okay, so this is infamous for being one of the worst worded effects in Yu-Gi-Oh! History. I'll put the text up on the screen now. Essentially what it does is let you banish your monsters from the field instead when a card would be removed from your graveyard. Wow, so you mean instead of using probably the useless cards in my graveyard banishes, I can deplete my own field resources instead? Yeah, how great. Yeah, this has uses with cards like DD Scout Plane, but 9 out of 10 this card, all it does is make you take a huge minus to save your graveyard. Let's be honest here, if you're playing a bunch of banished cards, you didn't care much about anyway. Next. Like the Dark Door, Vengeful Bog Spirit is a very limited floodgate. However, unlike Dark Door, which means only one monster can attack a turn, Bog Spirit lets any monster attack, but not on the turn they're summoned. Which you could argue is better or worse than Dark Door, I don't know which, but to be perfectly honest with you, like Dark Door, why would you play this when you can play Limit Area B or Gravity Bind? And even with Benkei, this isn't even that good, because if you summon Benkei, you want to attack with him that turn ideally and win the game. Yeah, this card had a good scene in the anime with the Winged Dragon of Ra, but otherwise it has nothing to offer. Next. Now, for all the problems I have with this set, at least I can say it was bookended by 2 great secret rares. Now, Gemini Elf was a great beater for the time, elevating aggro decks back into the meta, but she only lasted about a year or so as a beatdown staple before the Zoo decks took over that role. On the other hand, Magic Cylinder not only had an immediate impact upon release, but stayed relevant for over half a decade. A normal trap, this card is 1 part negate attack and 1 part burn spell. As upon activation, when you're attacked, it will negate the attack and then fire damage equal to that monster's attack points directly at the opponent. Now, before talking about this card's history, I will say this. In modern Yu-Gi-Oh!, this card is a massive noob trap. There was a saying in Yu-Gi-Oh! For many years that the sign of a good player was realizing that this card is terrible, and nowadays, yeah, that's completely true, as this card offers no card draw or removal, making it an inherent minus, and the effect it offers is too low power to consider running, with burn damage in general being irrelevant outside of time rules and dedicated burn decks. But when this set came out, however, this was actually a really great card in both burn and non-burn decks alike. This was because the game was so much slower that stopping one attack to buy a turn was good, and with life points being much more important in the grindier GOAT era, this card could be a massive turn-in advantage for the player who used it. In non-burn decks, this card saw less play, but was a really good way to cheese a win against decks with big monsters, like Chaos and Monarch, by doing over 2k damage, whereas in burn, it was not only usually one of the best burn cards in the deck, along with Just Desserts and Secret Barrel, but a way of preventing damage for a turn if your floodgates were down. Now, as the game got faster, this card saw less and less play for the aforementioned lack of effect to the board, but did occasionally see play in Chain Burn as another massive burn spell, so there is that. And would also see a new support card in Magical Cylinders, which not only let you set it from the deck, but also double any damage it delivers, which was both a potential game ender and a psychological trick versus your opponent, as they would know it was there and had to play around it. Overall, yes, Magic Cylinder has long since passed its prime, but for its legacy as both a serious card in early Yu-Gi-Oh!, its role in one of the GOAT's top decks, and its legendary meme status in modern Yu-Gi-Oh!, it has to be regarded as one of the best cards from this set. And that was Labyrinth of Nightmare. Like I said in the beginning, definitely a power downgrade from the last few sets, but still a solid provider of powerful cards that saw play for many years. Honestly, other than Card of Safe Return, I'd argue this is one of the most balanced sets we've seen up to this point. While it's not one of my favourite sets, it definitely deserves recognition for impacting the game in a way that didn't break it in two. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all soon when we cover one of the most broken sets in early Yu-Gi-Oh! History. Oh joy. See you all then.